Hello, welcome back. Thank you for watching this drive. Apologize for the video quality. There's some weird stuff on the windows during the winter months, and it was very tough to keep up with cleaning the window every single night. So, apologize for the quality, but hope you still enjoy the drive. I'm going to continue reading from the July 2019 Automobile Magazine. Simply Continental, Grand Touring Across America in Bentley's Flagship Coupe by Mike Schaefer. With 2.3 billion acres of snow-capped mountains, deserts of red Martian terrain, diverse forests brimming with all manner of wildlife, endless plains stretching as far as the skies above them, countless lakes, rivers, meandering streams, and 2 oceans, we're spoiled by the splendor of America. But given our busy daily lives, its majesty is also sometimes easy to forget. So, in an effort to reacquaint myself with the glorious nature of our home, I became determined to embark on a good old-fashioned cross-country road trip. All I need was a car as magnificent as the scenery. A car like, let's say, the 2019 Bentley Continental GT. Why the Bentley? The all-new third-gen model is just hitting its stride, and crossing the continent in a Continental seemed a prop. But more than that, this year marks the 100th anniversary of one Walter Owen Bentley setting up shop just north of London to start his namesake marquee. A century of building some of the finest cars in the world is worth celebrating, and our journey would be the proverbial first clink of the champagne flutes. Even in Bentley's modest shade of verdant green, the Continental was easy to spot as we arrived at our San Francisco starting gate, thanks to its lower, wider grille and 4 ascending headlamps that have evolved to perfection on the modern era car. Sunbursts pinged off the metallic diamond grille and the lacerations of the Scotch glass headlights. Inside, both main and secondary hides wore a lush saddle tan mix, accented by what seemed like a tree's worth of dark-stained burr walnut inlays. My co-driver on this epic adventure was Mike Foster, a handsome fellow and one hell of a photographer. Overpriced coffees in hand, Foster and I made a break for the Golden Gate Bridge to capture the sunset. As the fog crept in and the cargo ships passing through turned to silhouettes, we grabbed a few shots, then headed east towards our first motel stay on a 13-day, roughly 4,300-mile trip across the states. The next morning, then woke up to the Bentley's fabulous 6-liter W12 and lit off in the dark towards our first destination, Yosemite Valley. We made it as the sun crested the granite monoliths, and just before an armada of tour buses would vomit out the first of their selfie stick welding cargo. The roads to and from Yosemite proved almost as captivating as the park itself, with craggy white granite that slid down to the pavement like a petrified avalanche. The rock faces provided a perfect echo chamber for the Continental's throaty exhaust note as we made our way towards the dusty roads of California's Alabama hills. There, we took our first measure of the GT's dynamic capabilities. At the first of many empty streets, we experienced for ourselves how quickly 626 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque can shove some 5,000 pounds of metal and cow. But Bentley claims 60 miles an hour arrives in about 3.6 seconds. There are so many cars that go fast these days, it's easy to forget what really quick really is. The Continental GT reminded us, in a hurry. A dozen or so hard launches later, we moved on to flexing the $8,670 option that is the car's fabulous 2,200 watt 18-speaker NAMM sound system. I'm no hardcore audiophile, but I know the difference between a good stereo and a great stereo. And this one made our Bluetooth iTunes music sound like it was emanating from the Disney concert hall. The NAMM was still cranking as we descended into Death Valley for lunch. While there, we encountered a friendly group of Harley riders who cracked wise with some nice Jaguar jokes. From there, we made it to the Valley of Fire State Park outside of Las Vegas as dusk fell. As the ridges of the valley dimmed to an inky black, it lit up the Continental's profile just so, producing an image that turned out to be my favorite shot of the thousands we took along the way. Later that evening, at a red light on the Vegas Strip, a Nissan 370Z stopped next to us and dropped its airbags until the bodywork hovered a few hairs above the pavement and proceeded to bounce the engine off its rev limiter to the delight of a cheering gawker shooting a video from the sidewalk. Then he aimed his phone our way and urged us to do the same. No dice. I turned to Foster. Bentley boys don't rev for cell phones. For all its weird charms and wild debauchery, Las Vegas is a slap in the face to America's natural beauty. So we kept our lens caps on and crashed hard onto our beds at Aria. Came morning, we snaked our way through the late night turned early morning gamblers on our way to Utah's impossibly scenic Zion National Park. There we snagged some GT glamour shots before heading to Lake Powell on the border of Utah and Arizona for the night. The next morning, we caught the sunrise on a boat launch feeding into the Arizona waters of Wahweap Bay, then followed a reservoir road to the Glen Canyon Dam before making a break for Colorado. Following the infinite lines of the horizon, we grew to appreciate what is arguably the Continental's most unique feature, its infotainment screen that can flip up into the dash to reveal an analog stopwatch thermometer, and compass at the touch of a button. As we ascended into Colorado towards Telluride, the temperature dropped and snow started to blanket the landscape. Good thing the GT had been fitted with Pirelli Sato 03 winter rubber. Although the tires didn't wrap around the Continental's more desirable 5-spoke rims, the aesthetic trade-off was more than worth it when the otherwise perfect pavement turned sketchy on us. Previous generation Continentals handled well despite being oil tanker heavy, and various sport models culminating in the GT3R pushed the limits of that hefty handicap. The new Continental doesn't change direction like the Cayman, nor is it made to, but it does share some of that chassis DNA with today's Porsche Panamera, and it proved more than capable of tackling the mountain road's Madrid twists and turns. To change direction as well as it does despite being as heavy as it is, I tip my monocle to the engineers and crew. From Telluride, we bombed down a scenic overlook to get a clean shot of the range from the Coors Light commercials before beelining it to Colorado's famed Pikes Peak. Praise be to the Continental's ability to quickly dispose of slow-moving RV convoys, pokey Priuses, and other rolling obstacles. We got to the gate 7 minutes before closing time. The peak was closed, but we made it as far as Devil's Playground, about 1,000 feet from the summit. "You guys were just up here," the ranger at the closure exclaimed, referring to Bentley in general. True enough, a nearly stock Bentayga had been recently obliterated the SUV class record during the 102nd Pikes Peak hill climb. As much as we wanted to enjoy soaking up the serenity of the Midwest, most of the scenery between eastern Colorado and western Tennessee is, let's just say, consistent. We decided to drive as long and as far as we could, and only sleep when we couldn't drive anymore. We traversed roughly 1,200 miles in a day, and the next morning our tushies were happy to sink back into the Continental's diamond patterned thrones, a testament to how comfortable they are. 2 days later we arrived outside of Nashville, in a small town near the start of the Trail of the Dragon, one of the most storied stretches of road in America. The following morning we awoke to steady rain, which kept the usual swarms of motorcyclists away from this route. Although the big coupe performs the gentler, sweeping curves we tackled in the mountains of Colorado, the GT swallowed up the tail's sharp, dramatic increasing and decreasing radius hairpins almost as happily. It didn't hurt to know that the car's somewhat invasive traction control was there to help keep us from spinning off the Dragon's sopping wet pavement. With the heat blasting our rain-soaked boots, we wound our way up North Carolina's picturesque Blue Ridge Parkway. It was well past dark, so we took it easy to avoid any dicey patches of road or rogue deer, and made plans to hit the Lynn Cove Viaduct, a 1,243-foot bridge that winds around Grandfather Mountain in western North Carolina, by sunrise. Brutal gusts of wind made for a harrowing morning, but we braved the gale and headed back down from the viaduct towards Assateague Island, a thin sliver of Atlantic barrier straddling Maryland and Virginia. We arrived before anyone else and drove onto the sand. Just as the wheels started to slip, we got out to let some air out of the tires. At exactly that time, a lifted Wrangler drove up. Stifling laughter, they asked, "You stuck?" and proceeded to tell us to do what we already were doing. "Can we take a picture? We never thought we'd see a Bentley out here." Later that day, an old friend found me on Instagram and sent me a link to the local Assateague off-road Facebook group with the headline, "Bentley Stuck on the Beach in MD." I take great pride in the fact that after the photo was taken, we hopped back in with tires appropriately deflated and emerged triumphant, breaking nary a sweat. Not only that, but we did several laps on the soft beach to snap off some photos. If you're reading this, Mr. Lifted Wrangler guy, you can take the sand you thought we were stuck in and pound it. As we rolled into the nation's capital at our journey's end, we couldn't help but reflect on what an astonishing trip we'd had. It's hard to express how perfect the Continental was for this adventure. Its power was exhilarating and effortless from the first freeway entry in San Fran to the last one outside DC. It chewed up and spit out gnarled, twisting mountain roads and coddled us with heat, massage, and music during those endless highway miles. It conquered the sands of Alabama hills and, especially, Assateague. There is no environment where the Continental wouldn't thrive. We know, because we put it through all of them, and it's beautiful. Heart-achingly and timelessly so much like the amazing country we traversed it in. Breitling and Bentley, still ticking. It's easy to trace Bentley's modern-era renaissance to the launch of the 2003 Continental GT, and not only because it marked the unofficial beginning of Volkswagen stewardship, the Conti also featured a dashboard clock made by Breitling, the start of a collaboration that has become the longest ever partnership between a watch brand and an automobile manufacturer. Shortly after the clock's appearance in the car, Breitling's first watch dedicated to Bentley was showcased in the spring of 2003. In June of the same year, Breitling created a limited series chronograph called Bentley Le Mans, celebrating the marque's triumphant return to the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Although the link between the two companies might have seemed like badge engineering at this time, with almost 2 decades of hindsight, it has proven to be a natural fit. Quote, "Before even partnering with Bentley, Willy Breitling, the late son of company founder Gaston, was driving cars from the British manufacturer," Breitling CEO Georges Kern said. When Bentley asked Breitling to design the onboard clock for its new flagship model, the latter's chronographs, counters, tachometers, and onboard chronographs were already being used by drivers. It's almost as if they were predestined to cooperate. And the very fact that the partnership has been so prolific, enduring, and of such great quality, it is because we are authentically sharing core values, and though time, we both evolve by focusing on a future shaped by our passion for innovation. End quote. There was something ineffable about the original Breitling for Bentley's chronograph collection. The watches were big and brushed with a lot of wrist presence. Early models were simply massive, like the 48.7mm Breitling for Bentley 6.75, which you could have in either steel or gold. For better or for worse, it set off the large watch craze in the early aughts that continue to this day. The Breitling factory in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland, keeps churning out new Bentley-themed models, though they're smaller and more subdued than the original lineup. In terms of their DNA, the main codes are still firmly in place, Kern said of the range's evolution. The difference is that the new models will no longer be mono products such as Breitling for Bentley, but instead limited editions taking aboard events, news, and brand storage while being linked to our existing watch lines. The premier B01 chronograph 42 Bentley in British Racing Green was a harbinger for the new direction, with an engraved plate inspired by the dashboard of the 1929 Blower Bentley. Hot on its dials was a recently launched premier Bentley Centenary Limited Edition, created to celebrate Bentley's 100th anniversary. It features a brown leather strap inspired by Bentley's modern seat design and a brown burl elm dial that evoke the wooden inlays of the supercharged Bentley 4.5-liter 1930 No. 9 Le Mans race car. There are still Breitling clocks and Bentley dashes, and if you have your Druthers, you can option your Bentayga with the Bentley Mulliner Turbobillion for the pricey sum of $168,100, and that pencils out to about 15% more than the original sticker price of the 2003 Continental GT. As for the future, up next is a more modern, sporting watch evoking the story of races and Bentley's track record. We are continuing to write new chapters that tell our shared story, Kern said. As of now, what I can say is that we will annually integrate a new Bentley edition within our existing core lines. Bentley is a legend of our past, present, and future. Bentley at 100. Perseverance never gets old. The proud British marquis has been through it all. As we look over Bentley's 100-year existence, we see a company that has weathered virtually every storm that can batter a high-end automaker. Yet the marquis endures, and not just a name. You'll find a common thread running from W.O. Bentley's first experimental cars to the latest Bentaygas and Continental GTs in their style, performance, even their mode of manufacture. Were W.O. alive today, he'd recognize and likely approve of the cars bearing his name, and he'd be amazed at the course of his company's history. 1919 to 1931, the Cricklewood era. Walter Owen Bentley was born in London in 1888. He dreamed of a railroad career, but an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway disavowed him of that ambition. A keen motorcycle racer, he saw great promise in the gasoline engine, and in 1912 he and his brother Horace began importing Darreux, Flandrin, and Perrant cars from France. W.O. was an early proponent of racing as a way to boost sales, and the diminutive DFP 12/15 proved competitive. He realized the car's potential was limited by its steel and iron pistons, which would melt or break. Inspired by a piston-shaped aluminum paperweight, he began experimenting with aluminum-copper alloys and developed a lightweight, durable aluminum piston. His modified DFP set several records at Brooklands in the UK, but the outbreak of World War I meant Bentley was unable to capitalize on that success. Both Bentley brothers enlisted, and W.O. set about trying to convince aircraft engine manufacturers of the benefits of aluminum pistons. In France, he investigated the alarming and deadly failure rate of Clerget rotary engines, using aluminum cylinders with steel liners. He developed and improved and cemented Bentley's lifelong resolve that performance must go hand in hand with reliability. Armistice ended Bentley's aero engine activities, and in 1919, the brothers established Bentley Motors in the Cricklewood area of London. W.O. developed a 16-valve overhead cam, twin-plug, 4-cylinder engine that was extraordinarily advanced for its time. His first experimental cars established a Bentley ethos, tractable and reliable enough to drive every day, yet fast enough to compete on the racetrack. Bentley's 3-liter race cars reflected his conviction that strength and reliability were paramount, with pedals and levers drilled to save ounces, while his overcautious engineering piled on the pounds. Ettore Bugatti famously described the Bentley as le camion plus vite du monde, the fastest truck in the world. Less well known and unattributed is the recorded comment that Bentley always did want to design a locomotive. Now he's gone and done it. Bentley's racing success is well known, as are the Bentley boys. Haiti with their survival of World War I, these rich playboys lived large, drove fast, and gravitated towards Bentley cars. They raced purely for thrills, but Bentley himself saw the track strictly as a sales tool. We didn't indulge in racing for the spectacle, he wrote, or anything except what we could get out of it indirectly in the way of business. A scarcely spotting attitude, some may think, but to survive, racing just had to be related to sales and nothing else. Competition in the car business was fierce, and Bentley's business acumen paled in comparison to his engineering skills. By 1925, Bentley had developed the 6.5 liter and the Speed 6, which would become his most successful race cars, but the money was quickly running out. W.O. approached Wolf Babe Bernito, heir to the Kimberley diamond mine fortune and W.O.'s favorite Bentley boy. Bernardo shared Bentley's conviction that victory was achieved by outlasting the competition. He drove to the book, Bentley wrote, keeping perfect position in the field and religiously within permitted revs, following all instructions to the letter. W.O. suggested that if he had wished to continue enjoying Bentley vehicles, Bernardo might consider injecting some cash into the company. Bernardo was every bit as shrewd in business as he was on the track, and the changes implemented by his staff led to several high-level departures, including Horace Bentley. But it was under Bernardo's regime that Bentley developed the 4.5 liter, in which Bernardo would win Le Mans in 1928, and which would later be supercharged as the blower Bentley, much to W.O.'s chagrin. The beginning of 1929 saw the company turn its first profit, and W.O. considered taking Bentley Motors public. But then the stock market crashed, and the good times came to a screeching halt. In September of 1930, Bentley introduced the fabulous 8 liter, a large luxury car designed to compete with Rolls-Royce, but the market for such opulent cars had dried up overnight. Bernardo's board dictated that 8 liter frames be paired with the low-cost pushrod 6 to compete against the Rolls-Royce 20/25, the small car that helped Rolls weather the Great Depression. W.O. attempted to distance himself from the car, telling the board, "I don't know anything about pushrods, I'm afraid." As he predicted, the resulting 4 liter was a disaster. It wasn't a car that could be recognized as a Bentley at all, he complained, pointing to its poor performance, ridiculous power-to-weight ratio, and his insistence that Bentley clientele wouldn't have anything to do with the pushrod engines. He called the car a cumbersome makeshift, and it was received just as poorly as he expected. With the blower Bentleys affecting the company's reputation for reliability, Bentley Motors was at its breaking point. "We did everything we could to keep things going," Bentley wrote, but it was no good. The brakes were on the company hard, and trade was grinding to a standstill. Bernardo withdrew his funding after losing some £90,000. Still, as Bernardo later said, "On one diamond deal during that time, I made £120,000, so I can't grumble." But Bentley Motors went into receivership. The outlook was far from bleak. Aircraft engine manufacturer D. Napier and Son wanted to buy Bentley in order to get back into the car business. The deal seemed so certain that in July 1931, just as negotiations were announced, W.O. began working with Napier on a new car. When the November court date came, it seemed a mere formality for Napier's bid to be approved. Instead, W.O. would later write, "That day turned out to be the most disastrous of my life." Just as Napier made its offer, a lone gentleman stood and made a higher bid. A shocked Napier upped its offer, not wanting to see his courtroom turn into an auction house. The judge requested sealed bids. Napier reportedly lost Bentley by only a few £100, and for days the buyer's identity remained a mystery. Bentley himself only learned his fate after his wife overheard a conversation at a cocktail party. Rolls-Royce now owned Bentley. The agreement stipulated that W.O. remained under contract with Rolls-Royce, but he would have no hand in engineering. Instead, he was banished to the role of test driver. When his contract ended in 1935, Bentley fled to Lagonda. He reflected on Bentley Motors with sadness and disappointment, saying that if he could return to his youth, he might never have left the railways. 1931 to 1998, the Rolls-Royce era. Some people like to pretend Bentley ceased to exist in 1931. The argument is not unfounded. It was W.O. Bentley's engineering that set his cars apart, a role from which he was unceremoniously banned after Rolls-Royce took over. There were synergies between the companies and their founders. Like Bentley, Henry Royce got into the car business because he saw potential for improvement in the French cars he owned. Royce, too, was more concerned with engineering than administration. But unlike Bentley, Royce had a partner, Charles Rolls, who had solid business and sales expertise. It's fitting that the first Rolls-era Bentley was a Royce design, though a questionable one, a small, austere car that ran counter to Rolls' tradition. Codenamed Peregrine, the car's early tests were catastrophic. Its 2.4-liter engine was underpowered and had an unhealthy appetite for bearings. The project seemed doomed until someone suggested fitting the Rolls 20/25 powertrain and marketing it as a Bentley. Royce designed a variable control ride system to highlight its sporty nature, and in 1933, the Bentley 3.5-liter went on sale. The car was successful in both sales and racing, and despite his frustrations, W.O. deemed it the best car ever to bear his name. The 1930s saw Rolls' engineering department struggling to address overheating problems brought on by Germany's new high-speed autobahns. Greek racer Nicky Ambrikos endeavored to solve this problem with a lightweight wind-cheating body designed by Louis Poulin. Based on the upgraded 4.25-liter chassis, the Ambrose Bentley was a stellar performer. The car inspired both customers and Rolls engineering staff, which created a prototype based on the improved, but ultimately stillborn, Mark V chassis. The resulting Corniche was sent to the continent for testing, but was destroyed by German bombs in Dieppe, France, while awaiting a ship home. During World War II, Rolls-Royce concentrated on the magnificent Merlin aircraft engine, for which a new factory was built in Crewe, England. As the war wound down, it was decided that Bentleys would be smaller cars that would maximize parts commonality with Rolls-Royces, the first example being the 1946 Bentley Mark VI. On the positive side, the lightweight combined with the Rolls powertrain yielded sprightly performance aligned with Bentley's image. The bright spot of the post-war period came in 1952. Project engineer H. Ivan Everden was charged with designing a performance-oriented coupe but was ordered to maintain the Mark VI's wheelbase, track, and powertrain. Everden reduced the weight, massaged the 4.6-liter engine, and with stylist John P. Blatchley, created an Ambrikos-inspired body with a minimalized frontal area. The result was the R-Type Continental, a 129-mile-an-hour beauty that was a true high-performance tourer, the pinnacle of the potential synergies between Bentley performance and Rolls refinement. The R-Type Continental was worthy of Bentley's marketing slogan, the silent sports car, but it was all downhill from there. The Bentley S1 was introduced in 1955, followed by the S2 and the S3. These cars represented a slow but steady erosion of the Bentley ethos, each one softer and more Rolls-like than its predecessor. When the T-Series made its debut in 1965, it was virtually indistinguishable from the Silver Shadow, completely lacking the sporty nature Bentleys had been known for. Rolls-Royce Motors was acquired by Vickers in 1980, and although Bentley and Rolls models remained largely identical, there were legitimate attempts to revive the old performance image, chief among them the 1982 Mulsanne Turbo and 1985 Turbo R. Still, there was little to counter the argument that Bentley had died in 1931, but all that was about to change. 1988 to present, the Volkswagen era. In 1998, Volkswagen bought Rolls-Royce, except it didn't. In the early 1970s, Rolls-Royce was nearly bankrupt by development of the RB211 turbofan engine. The British government nationalized the company and separated the car and aircraft engine businesses. Vickers bought Rolls-Royce Motors in 1980, and when it decided to sell it almost 2 decades later, BMW, supplier of the Marquis engines, was the presumptive buyer. But in a move that echoed the Napier upset in 1931, VW swooped in with a higher bid. It was only after the purchase that VW realized what the sale didn't include: use of the Rolls-Royce name and logo, which many observers felt was the company's most valuable asset. The name still belonged to the aircraft engine business, which had a partnership with BMW, and to which it promptly offered the naming rights for less than a tenth of what VW paid for the whole company. In practical terms, VW had really only purchased Bentley and the Crewe factory. Although some industry pundits predicted disaster, BMW stock rose while VW's fell. This was actually a good time to own Bentley. Vickers had been trying to restore the Marquis' luster, and the new for 1998 Arnage, though closely related to the Rolls-Royce Silver Seraph, had its own distinct personality, which VW emphasized by replacing its BMW engine with an updated Rolls-Bentley L Series V8. A hedge, as BMW's agreement allowed it to stop supplying engines on short notice. More promising was the Java concept, built for the 1994 Geneva Auto Show and based on a BMW 5 Series platform. Its smaller size and Cosworth Turbo V8 signals Vickers' intention to resurrect Bentley's sporting nature. Although it wasn't intended for production, Bentley built 18 examples, 6 coupes, 6 convertibles, and 6 wagons for a smitten Sultan of Brunei. The Java's BMW bones made it a non-starter for VW, but the car's size and mission influenced what would become the first VW-era Bentley, the 2003 Continental GT. Our own George Kacher opened his first review by saying, "The Continental GT Coupe is the first truly outstanding Bentley since the classic Type R Continental." Indeed, it seemed to embody VW's aspirations for both Bentley and Rolls-Royce. Styling recalled the classic R-Type Continental, and the car's heft, speed, and big 6-liter W12 would have appealed to WO even as he scoffed at the turbochargers. The interior displayed craftsmanship that would have been required to carry on the Rolls-Royce tradition. It was, indeed, a less recognized aspect of Bentley cars, which were, after all, hand-built just like Rolls-Royces. More amazing was the transformation of the Crew factory. Automobile editor emeritus, the late David E. Davis Jr., visited it in 2003. It's changed dramatically, with German light and fresh paint and new machinery replacing rundown British charm, he reported. To a several-time visitor over the past 3 decades, the difference is startling. About all that's recognizable are the fabric, leather, and wood areas, where the tools are higher tech, but eyeballs, fingertips, and experience still play an important role. Today, leather hides are still hand-stitched, and wood is still hand-sanded. Parts built traditionally by external facilities, things like dashboards and engines, are assembled in-house. And while slick machines transport cars from station to station, nearly everything is attached by hand. Robots are responsible only for windshield adhesive and application of lacquer to wood. Buyers recognize the changes. Bentleys are no longer seen as cut-rate Rolls-Royces, but instead are appreciated for their own rich heritage and craftsmanship. Of course, it's never smooth sailing for Bentley. 2018 saw U.S. sales drop, prompted by economic uncertainty and a delay in Continental production. But such setbacks are nothing new to Bentley, and we never wager against the company weathering the latest troubles and coming out ahead, just as it has for the past 100 years. Family business. Bentley employment is often a familiar affair. We caught up with father and daughter Mark and Chloe Ellis, who represent 2 of 3 generations to work for Bentley. My father was a welder, Mark says. When you left school as a young lad, you either went to work at Rolls-Royce, Bentley, or the railway. Now the Crew Railway Works has closed, and we've reduced our hiring dramatically. So for Chloe, it was very different in terms of the opportunities. Mark joined Bentley's Craft Apprentice System program in 1987. We had our own training school on site, he says. The company made its own tools and jigs in-house, and he became a toolmaker. This was before AutoCAD. The guys upstairs used to do all the drawing. I did that for a period. Things changed after the VW purchase. All of our core competencies, things like wood and leather, started to grow, he says. Where there were 2 or 3 people in those departments, all the people from the engine line started to take on those newfound core competencies. Mark worked his way up through the wood shop, then became a module leader, charged with ensuring smooth communications between manufacturing, finance, logistics, purchasing, and engineering. I was a module leader on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd generation GT and Bentayga. Today, I am a manufacturing project leader on the 3rd generation of GT and Continental GT. Chloe's career path followed a similar course, but in a different part of the business. I started as my dad did, an apprentice straight from school when I was 16, eventually settling in marketing, she says. Bentley sponsored Chloe as she completed her business degree. Named Apprentice of the Year in 2015, she spent time in Wolfsburg, Germany, working with her counterparts at other VW brands. When I returned, my manager put me up for a promotion. Now I work in the fleet management team, taking care of the cars that go to events. I'm looking for that car from when it's built to when it reaches the end customer. Bentley employment was an obvious choice for Mark, but Chloe's motivations were different. Seeing other people my age going to university and struggling afterwards to find a career path, she says. Whereas Bentley were offering such a valuable proposition. Not only will we train you, but we'll provide you a salary whilst you're doing it, and we'll give you valuable business insight as well. Asked about the changes they've seen over the years, Mark offers, when I first started, the business was very autocratic. My manager would come out of his office once a day, do a lap, and that was it. Today, managers sit in the office amongst everybody. Our CEO, Adrian Hallmark, is always visible. The world has changed. Not just Bentley, but the world has changed. WO and the blower Bentleys. For many, the supercharged blower Bentleys are the iconic cars of the Cricklewood era, yet WO Bentley strongly opposed their development. The idea for supercharging a Bentley car came from Sir Henry Tim Birkin, a fearless driver who Bentley called the Bentley boy par excellence. Bentley's cars needed more power, and WO's solution was more displacement, the 6-cylinder, 6.5 liter. Birkin, however, wanted to supercharge to 4.5, despite WO's conviction that it would pervert the engine's design and corrupt its performance. Every engine we built was conceived with an eye first on reliability, Bentley explained, then on smoothness and silence, and lastly on sheer power output. Of course, we were after power output, but not by any falsely induced means, and I always held that the supercharger applied to the Bentley engine was a false inducer. It was against all my engineering principles. Still, Bentley couldn't stop Birkin from building his own team. It was, I thought, the worst thing that could happen to us. There would still be Bentley cars, carrying with them the spruest glamour associated to the public's mind with the supercharger. I feared the worst and looked forward to their first appearance with anxiety. Bentley's prediction proved accurate, with the DNF in the blower's first outing. But the cars were not without successes. They took 3rd and 4th place at the Irish International Grand Prix of 1929 and 30, and 2nd in the 1930 French Grand Prix. The cars broke numerous track records, but mostly they just broke. The supercharged 4.5 never won a race, suffered a never-ending series of mechanical failures, brought by the Marquis Bentley disrepute. W.O. wrote, and incidentally cost financier Dorothy Paget a large sum. It's a sad story with a sting in the tail, he continued, because Tim managed to persuade Bernito to allow him to enter a team in the 1930 Le Mans, in which none survived. We were obliged, in order to meet the regulations, to construct no less than 50 of these machines for sale to the public. Bentley's 6.5-liter Speed 6 won Le Mans in 1930, a repeat of 1929, while Birkin's two blowers failed in the 20th and 21st hour, respectively. But the need to build 50 cars impacting production of the strong-selling 6.5-liter, a fact Bentley saw as a contributor, though a minor one, to the company's demise. Natural-born racers, Bentley quickly proved its motorsports prowess. Before the inaugural running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1923, W.O. Bentley remarked, "I think the whole thing is crazy. Cars aren't designed to stand that sort of strain for 24 hours. It's notable then that Bentley Motors went on to win the famous endurance race 5 times over the following 8 years. Racing was a big part of the Bentley brand in its founding decade. The famous Bentley Boys, a wild and willing pack of wealthy customers and racers whose off-track antics were often as entertaining as their driving, built a whole lifestyle around the cars they competed in. One such member and Bentley's first factory driver, Frank Clement, was first to drive a Bentley to a win in the Whitson Junior Spirit Handicap at the famous high-speed Brooklyn circuit in May 1921. The car was the EXP2, the second prototype of Bentley's first model, the 3-liter, and the oldest surviving Bentley today. EXP2 was built in 1919 and boasted a lightweight monoblock engine made largely from aluminum and magnesium with fairly sophisticated tech for the time, such as 4 valves per cylinder and a twin-plug design. 2 years and several more victories later at Brooklands and other venues, John Duff and Clement entered the 1923 24 Hours of Le Mans with Duff's personal 3-liter. After setting the fastest lap, they finished 4th overall, in part due to a leaking fuel tank. In 1924, the same pair contested the race again in the 3-liter and won. Bentley won outright again in 4 consecutive years from 1927 to 1930, with a 3-liter, 4.5-liter, and in the last 2 years with a Speed 6. The following year, Bentley was rendered bankrupt before Rolls-Royce purchased it. Not until 2001 would Bentley, by then owned by Volkswagen, return to Le Mans. The car was known as the EXP Speed 8 and was developed from the Audi R8C, a platform Audi abandoned after a single failed attempt at the 1999 24 Hours. The new car retained Audi's 3.6-liter turbocharged V8 engine but ran a new X-Track transmission and finished 3rd, behind 2 of Audi's new R8 prototypes. The following year, the engine was bumped to 4 liters, and just 1 car ran at Le Mans, again finishing behind Audi R8s, this time coming in 4th overall. Success finally came in 2003, and the Evolve car, now shortened its name to just Speed 8, finished 1st and 2nd. Not coincidentally, no factory Audis were entered that year. Mr. Le Mans, Tom Christensen, co-drove the winning car, achieving his 5th of 9 overall wins at the French circuit. The celebration was held at the Savoy in London with the same food and drink Wolf Bernardo enjoyed in his Le Mans victory dinner in 1927. Today, Bentley's racing legacy continues with the Continental GT3. Now in its 2nd generation, the first GT3 won 45 races worldwide and the 2015 Blancpain GT Sprint Series Championship. The all-new race car has a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 producing some 550 horsepower, a carbon fiber drive shaft, massive Alcon racing brakes, and motorsport-specific BBS wheels. Watch for it on racetracks across Europe this year wearing special 100th anniversary livery.